Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter. Of course, you can subscribe to the channel. Let's talk boxing. We're going to engage with another controversial topic, as we always do on this channel. It's divided opinion, so let's hear your opinions on it too. Canelo Alvarez was being rumoured to be due to fight Badu Jack for the Cruiserweight title. This would have been an exceptional new building block on the legacy of Canelo Alvarez had he managed to take the strap legitimately. After all, in the embryonic stages of his career, this is a guy that started off as a light welterweight. However, rumours quickly began to emerge that the fight would not occur within the typical parameters of cruiserweight, and that actually we might see the re-emergence of Canelo weight. These rumours first begun when Amir Abdullah of Skills Challenge, who is the promoter of Badu Jack, said that the deal was 90% done. But there was a bit of a sticking point on the weight category, the weight limit that would be applied. And immediately I came out on Twitter to say this was unacceptable in my opinion. Sure, if you want to make a catchweight fight because you want to make a special event or a special fight between two guys and you need to do it to make it work, I understand. But then, if that's the case, the title for that specific division should not be on the line. If you are going to become the Cruiserweight champion, you have to win a title within the typical parameters of Cruiserweight for it to be legitimate. And a few of you disagreed with that, and we'll get to that in a moment. But it then emerged yesterday that Badu Jack put out a tweet to say, I won't be fighting Canelo next. They said the weight difference is too much. They wanted to drain the old man and fight me 20 pounds under the cruiserweight limit for the title. In other words, 180 pounds. Plus, there would have been a rehydration clause. Canelo, let's give the fans what they want and see the David Benavidez fight. So since he's clearly very upset and it seems quite offended by Canelo's attempts to potentially manipulate the situation here and drain and weaken Badu Jack, he sort of challenged him to fight but David Benavidez, putting a bit of pressure on him there. Now, when it came to my position, there were a few people that disagreed. And remember, I like to play the defense and the prosecution and then let you guys be the jury. So this is why I'm offering you these arguments, because I want to be fair in my analysis. I don't want it to be a one-way thing. Base the Kid, who I've had on this channel before, and even when I disagree with Base, he always puts his arguments together intellectually, always a gentleman. I love debating him. He put out a tweet to say anything over 175 is technically at that weight. There's nothing saying that you must be at the limit to compete. Philo Bedo agreed with Base the Kid, and he said, I agree with you in principle, Chris Andre, but anything from 175 pounds to 200 pounds is cruiserweight. And Callum Walton, who I actually want to get on the channel, we've spoken before, we've agreed to it, and it sort of fell through. I've got to find an opportunity to get on his case again. He's now a professional fighter. I believe he's 3-0 at this stage. He was a highly ranked amateur here in the UK. I believe he was ranked in the top 4 light heavyweights in the country. Well, Callum said it's under 200 pounds, and similar things have been done before. So he's taken that sort of position of Base the Kid and Philo Bedo. Now, I asked, imagine asking Devin Haney, therefore, to make 131 pounds. Technically, that's the lightweight division too. But we all know that 135 pounds is the limit. It's between 130 and 135 pounds. In fact, we refer to the upper limit when we're talking about a weight category. So you'll say somebody's the champion at 135 pounds. They're the champion at 140 pounds. You don't say they're the champion at 136 pounds. To suggest light welterweight, you say 140, you talk about the limit. And yet none of us would have expected Devin Haney to accept those kind of terms, say from Vasyl Lomachenko or from a Shakur Stevenson. Well, I had the Pugilistic Fetus, quality name for a Twitter account, and Base the Kid disagree with me. The Pugilistic Fetus said the fight isn't your best argument because Jack is a former super middleweight and should not need the full 200, and cruiserweight was 190 for many years. Base the Kid said this is a bad example. Devin can just about make 135 and didn't even want him taking the Loma fight, especially after they pushed it back after Ramadan. Ultimately, 200 is just a limit. Nothing says you must be at it. The speed limit on the road is 30. It doesn't mean you must drive at 30. I then asked the Pugilistic Fetus, when was the last time Jack weighed in at 190 pounds? He's going to be 40, and it's hard to boil down at that age. The limit is the limit. There is no motive to change that other than to weaken Badu Jack. Can he beat a healthy Badu Jack at cruiserweight at his best or not? And basically the kid said June 2021 was the last time he weighed in at 190 pounds or lower, so 2 years. Now, by the time obviously that fight would come around, it'd be 2.5 years, and they're now talking about it being at 180 pounds, 20 pounds under the limit according to Badu Jack, rather than 190. But even if we're talking about it at 190 pounds, it doesn't change the principle of what I'm arguing. So let's just pretend it would be at 190 pounds for a minute. Well, let's address these points. First and foremost, with regards to Devin Haney and his struggles compared to Badu Jack. The fact of the matter is weight categories exist for a reason, and weight issues exist beyond just aesthetics and assumptions. We all assume that Devin Haney is really struggling to make the weight, and he looks terrible, particularly because he becomes gaunt. Some people lose a lot of weight on their face, and he seems to be that sort of guy. However, when you actually analyze his energy levels in his performances, he doesn't seem to be struggling, does he? In the 2 Kambosos fights, he wasn't looking really slow and haggard late in the fight. Now, you might tell me, okay, Chris, but that was because it was quite an easy fight for Devin Haney, and he was able to control the tempo, so to speak, and contain himself. Well, the Vasyl-Lomachenko fight was not easy, and after 2 very difficult rounds for him in 10 and 11, he won round 12. So just because he looks terrible aesthetically, it doesn't necessarily mean he is in terrible shape when he's trying to make the weight. Bear in mind, Kambosos, who, sure, he looks a bit like an extra from The Walking Dead right there too. He doesn't look quite as bad as Devin Haney when it comes to making the weight, and we know he's significantly smaller as a fighter. Nonetheless, he was also in a position where he's the one that failed to make the weight, and he had to come back and try and make the weight. So we can't just assume, okay, well, we'll give Devin Haney a pass, but when it comes to Badu Jack, we have to force him, because we don't know now how Badu Jack would struggle to make the weight at that age. Bear in mind, we talk about it's only been 2 years or 2.5 years. If you look at some of the fighters that you saw within those time frames and how they declined within those time frames, you can see that, especially at a later age, it can be quite a swift and dramatic decline. The Roy Jones that beat Clinton Woods and everybody thought was looking untouchable, well, within 2 years, not only did he lose to Antonio Tarver, but he got blown out by Glenn Johnson. You then saw the likes of Luis Ortiz as well. Luis Ortiz may have lost to Deontay Wilder in that second fight, and he got caught, but he was winning every round of that fight. He was looking sharp. That same guy, within that same period of time, couple of years, was getting dropped and hurt by a washed Charles Martin. Then, of course, you've got Derek Chisora. Derek Chisora is a heavyweight who gave Usyk a real physical test. Sure, I had Usyk winning quite wide, but I know a lot of people had it closer than I did. But you can't deny, regardless of your scorecard, that it was a hard night's work for Alexander Usyk. Well, within a couple of years or 2.5 years, he fought Tyson Fury again. And look at the way that that fight is mocked. 2.5 years when you're at that age is no mean feat. You're talking about a long time. And you have to then drop that weight. It can really affect you. And don't forget, with Roy Jones as well, by the way, when he had that dip after the Woods fight and then he fought Tarver and Glenn Johnson, bear in mind, he'd also gone up to fight Ruiz and then he started to lose weight. So dropping the weight at a certain age can be really damaging and draining. And itty bitty bad boy, Jimmy J, he made a really interesting point on Twitter. He said, remember when Canelo gave that lame excuse as to why he didn't want to fight Bivol at 168 pounds? The excuse that Canelo Alvarez gave, which I actually bought into. Maybe he hoodwinked me too, right? He was saying, if I fight Bivol at 168 pounds and I beat him, people are only going to turn around and say you beat a drained Dimitri Bivol. So I want to go and do it at 175 pounds, and then you, notch on the bedpost, so to speak, get another achievement at light heavyweight. Why do I want to fight a weakened Dimitri Bivol? In the meantime, the cynical people out there were saying, no, that's not the reason, Chris. It's because if he loses at 168 pounds, he loses his undisputed titles. Now he has nothing. So if he goes back up to 175 and loses, he's still going to be the undisputed champion at super middleweight. And that's the real reason. Well, this seems to add weight to that argument, does it not? Because if you're so worried about draining fighters so that it doesn't ruin your reputation, why are you then not concerned about trying to win the Cruiserweight title in that manner? So shout out to Jimmy J for that very good point. As I've always said, in order to beat somebody and be a legitimate champion, you need to beat them in their legitimate realm. You cannot beat Usain Bolt in a 40-meter race and claim to be the 100-meter gold medalist. A number of years ago, back in 2015, Hector Bellerin, who was a Spanish footballer that plays for Arsenal, was clocked running a faster sprint time than Usain Bolt over 40 meters. He was clocked at running 4.41 seconds. A biomechanical analysis was published by the International Athletics Federation, and they found that Usain Bolt ran that period at 4.64 seconds. And so 0.23 seconds slower than Hector Bellerin. Now, let's just say for argument's sake, Bellerin was able to beat Usain Bolt, like I said, over that shorter distance. It doesn't make him an Olympic gold medalist. You know why? Because Usain Bolt doesn't hit top speed until 40 meters. It's at that point he hits top speed. And in the last 60 meters, he runs it at just over 3 seconds. So that's when he really starts to kick on. And it's for the same reason you cannot force a guy like Badu Jack to say, I'm going to fight at less than I'm allowed to at cruiserweight. When Base the Kid gave the analogy of a speeding and, you know, if you're allowed to drive up to 30 miles an hour on a residential road, it doesn't mean you have to drive at 30. Sure, you don't. You can drive at 25 if you want, but don't give me a speeding ticket for driving at 30. That's the point. I'm allowed to drive at 30. By the same token, you've got a guy like Canelo Alvarez. If he's able to beat a drained 180-pound Badu Jack, he might not be able to beat a 200-pound Badu Jack. So by the same token, in the same way that Hector Bellerin isn't faster than Usain Bolt over 100 meters, it wouldn't prove that Canelo Alvarez is the better cruiserweight at cruiserweight than Badu Jack. And I just want to show you guys that I'm very consistent with all this. It's nothing to do with picking on Canelo or anything like that. I've spoken against the weaponization of weight and weigh-ins consistently, and I have done this for years. You know, when Ryan Garcia was going to fight Tank Davis, they delayed the weigh-in. They actually pushed the weigh-in back. And that meant that there was less time for recovery and rehydration for Ryan Garcia. There was also a rehydration clause. And a lot of people were saying, well, Ryan shouldn't have agreed to it then. Yeah, we'll get to that in a moment too. But the fact of the matter is, Ryan was dropped with a body shot. And bear in mind, I picked Tank to win the fight based on technical elements, not the physical. So I'm not saying he won because of this. But there is a possibility that that body shot would not have had the impact it had if Ryan Garcia was healthier. By the same token, when Devin Haney fought Vasyl Lomachenko, they didn't push the weigh-in back like they did with Tank. They brought it forward. They did it 36 hours before the fight. And for those of you that saw my interviews with Steve Kim, who's a boxing insider, he's discussed this various issues with Matthew Macklin, with Ray Boom Boom Mancini, and he was talking on my channel about this, and he was saying how you might as well have weigh-ins on the Tuesday before the fight because there's so much time for rehydration, it doesn't matter. If Devin Haney had still had same-day weigh-ins, he would have been a welterweight in this day, in the past, say. So you've got a situation here where you're seeing the weaponization of weigh-ins because Vasyl Lomachenko could definitely still make 130 pounds. Many of these people have said that he could probably still make 126 pounds. So you've got somebody who is potentially a featherweight fighting somebody who's a welterweight. This is a weaponization of weights, right? You don't want to see this in the sport of boxing. I've also called for the banning of rehydration clauses. For instance, when Amir Khan was going to fight Kell Brook, and I was speaking about how dangerous that was. I've done this consistently, and I have never deviated from that position. Look at these tweets that I've managed to dig up from 2016. There's a soccer player, because I was talking to an American. There's a soccer player called Bellerin who's faster over 50 meters. It was 40, I should have said. I got that wrong. Over 50 meters than Usain Bolt. Does that mean Bellerin is a 100-meter gold medalist sprinter? It's dumb. And this was to do with the fact that Canelo was fighting at Canelo weight back then and claiming to be the king of the middleweight division. When you had Gennady Golovkin and he was clearly operating at middleweight and destroying middleweights that were legitimate middleweights, right? You have to have consistency. And this is what I always seek to have here, consistency and fairness. And I do just want to say that Callum Walton and Base the Kid did go on to say, well, Callum said, I wouldn't say it's fair, but people use their power when they have it. Money talks, basically. So he wasn't necessarily saying this is how it should be, but he's saying this is how it is. Base the Kid was saying, let's see what the dollar amount is that removes Badu Jack's principles. Well, clearly Badu Jack did not remove his principles and he stood firm, and that's correct. But he should not be in a position where we even have that conversation. Because Badu Jack's recently signed with Skills Challenge. He's got a great contract. He has the luxury of being able to say, you know what, I'm not going to sell my soul to this and put myself on the line. I've worked very hard to achieve my dreams. I didn't get any help when it came to draining somebody like Ilunga Makabu. I used to be a super middleweight. I've had to come up. I had to do it the hard way. I earned my respect and I earned my title. And it's not fair for somebody to come here and change the parameters and put shackles on me, beat a weakened version of me, and spend the rest of his life claiming that he won a legitimate cruiserweight title by beating Badu Jack. No, you want to beat Badu Jack, then you beat Badu Jack when he's healthy and at his best, and he can come in within any parameter of the cruiserweight division. However, had he not had the financial backing and security, he might have turned around and said, you know what, there's a lot of money here. I'm a prize fighter. I'm in the twilight of my career. Let me just take the cash. And Callum Walton would have been right. Money talks. But as boxing fans, we have to be able to save fighters from themselves, so to speak. Otherwise, where do you draw the line? Otherwise, why do we criticize Eddie Hearn, say, or whoever else for trying to make the fight between Conor Benn and Chris Eubank Jr.? Eubank Jr. wanted to make the fight. So if that's the case and you're not concerned, and well, it doesn't matter if they give up on their principles, let them in there, well, then you've got to be consistent with that. But we don't want that, do we? Because God forbid, if Chris Eubank had gotten hurt, well, then what happens? So the sport has to be able to protect fighters from themselves. Badu Jack has been a quality servant to the sport, and he deserves his props as a cruiserweight. Very, very underrated fighter, fantastic technical boxer, and he's going to take some beating at cruiserweight. There's no doubt about it, because he has some advantages over some of the other cruiserweights. And if you do want to go there and take his belt, do it properly, Canelo. Otherwise, go and fight Dimitri Bivol. Go and fight David Benavidez. They're fights that people want to see. But don't fight a handicapped fighter. Let me know what you think, ladies and gents. Please don't forget to hit a stiff jab on the like button, a right cross on the subscribe button, and an uppercut on the notifications button. Thanks for watching. Chat to you soon. Take care. God bless.